This podcast is brought to you by the Pomegranate Mint, Armenia's unofficial mint. Go to www.pomegranatemint.com and get your limited edition Armenian silver collectible coins today before history passes you by. The Pomegranate Mint. History in the palm of your hands.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Okay, so we are back with the Angry Armo podcast. Today I have a guest, my good friend Artur Aslanyan. I consider him a bit of a mentor of mine. And we're kind of winging it because we didn't pre-agree to like a very specific topic, but what are some of the topics we're touching on today, buddy?
Well, let's start on that mentor thing. I think the only reason you say that is because I'm one of the few Armenians you'll meet who just doesn't base their entire identity on hating Turks, who understands the concept of normalization of relations between Armenians and Turks, and in general bases his views not on emotions or fantasies or things like that, but just cold hard facts and things like that. And I think you aspire to do the same. So that's where I think you would say I'm a mentor. We should make that clear. It's not because I'm teaching you how to start a business or something like that. We share the same values and mentality when it comes to Armenian relations with its neighbors and things like that, I would say.
Right. Yeah. And then, for my part, I mean, I definitely don't base my identity off of hating Turks either. I might be angry at times, sometimes very angry. I'm working on it, but it's not like hateful, like oh, these barbarians. It's more. We actually, you know what? I guess I could kind of bring up the conversation we had yesterday, or not yesterday, some days back. The thing that is more or less a source of anger is not for me at least. It's not the genocide. It's not Western Armenia. This, that, the other thing. It's more what I take to be like a very kind of hypocrisy on their part. When I say there, I mean the nationalists in Turkey and Azerbaijan.
Well, I would suggest you be careful with accusations of hypocrisy. Not that there aren't hypocrisies, they're abound, they're everywhere, and you should call them out. However, you have to remember, as I said earlier, our nation is full of hypocrisies and fantasies itself. Armenians will speak of their genocide, but have absolute ignorance of other genocides, right? They'll make claims like the Armenian genocide is the first genocide of the 20th century because they are ignorant of any other genocide that could have potentially taken that position of being the first in the 20th century. And likewise,
most notably, just to take the opportunity to, to show some recognition, the Nama Herero genocide of Namibia under the German colonial government.
This is
which
generally the consensus as to being the first genocide of the 20th century. But I was going to say, Armenians will also be hypocrites in the idea that they don't think Turks can suffer. They don't think Turks can be murdered. And especially, they can't be murdered by Armenian hands in a criminal and callous way, which is absolutely ridiculous and hypocritical and then some.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I guess I can take I can accept, obviously there's a bit of hypocrisy on both sides. It's the the specifically what I'm talking about is when it comes to irredentism of like okay, obviously for geopolitical strategic reasons, most Armenians, for example, wouldn't want the northern part of Iran to break away as like a second Azerbaijani state, because that would be geopolitically bad for Armenia. But it would, but they probably wouldn't necessarily like die on a hill over it. If that makes sense. Um, it's like
Who's they? Who would not die on this hill? Armenians?
like yeah. What I mean is they probably wouldn't take the time to go to court and fight for the territorial integrity of Iran or send troops to help Iran or something.
Well, not that they have the capacity to
They
do
would
it. I think if they,
to yeah
I,
yeah yeah. But even if they did, I don't think they think that far.
I don't know about that. I don't know
But
about that. They might. They might. I wouldn't make that claim. I don't think Armenians are absolutely clueless about their geopolitical position. I wouldn't say that. Uh, had Armenia the capabilities, I think they would. They would aid Iran as much as possible in stifling any kind of separatism from the Azerbaijani population there. But you're correct to point this out that when it comes to territorial integrity versus separatism and right to self determination, there's hypocrisies everywhere. Like almost all states are hypocritical. When it suits them, they are on the side of territorial integrity. When it doesn't suit them, they are on the side of separatism and right to self determination. You could find this everywhere. From Israel supporting Azerbaijan's territorial integrity while it takes over the West Bank little chunk at a time. From Turkey that was lecturing Armenia about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict when it itself decades earlier had the whole Cyprus issue and did very similar things with Cyprus that Armenia did with Nagorno-Karabakh, and so on and so forth. So I think hypocrisies are
yeah,
abound.
and,
Yeah,
and the crazy thing about Cyprus is um I learned that it was actually even worse than I thought because so I knew that the Turkish army intervened on behalf of Turkish Cypriots, to prevent the Greek junta from like massacring them and all that stuff. So I knew that much. And then proceeded to occupy Cyprus under the pretense of being their security guarantor and all that. What I didn't know at the time is that they actually started settling Turkish
exactly. That's
citizens
what I was
there.
gonna say. The only
So
difference between what Armenia did with Nagorno-Karabakh and what Turkey did with Cyprus is that Turkey actually succeeded in settlements, whereas Armenians tried, but they really couldn't accomplish that many new settlements.
yeah, exactly. The only difference is that one was successful, the other one wasn't. That's really what it boils
Correct.
down to at the end of the
Correct.
day.
Also, as I mentioned in the case of the West Bank, right, Israelis are very successful in establishing settlements, whereas Armenians are not. And this is something that I always point out to Armenians too, that they can't
Hmm.
even maintain the population of the Republic of Armenia, and yet they're considering resettling occupied territories. The idea is just absurd. The idea is ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you'll get you'll get a handful of hardcore people, that will like go and be like, I'm patriotic. I'm going to take my family and settle in Artsakh or something, but they're in a very small minority, sadly. And this is actually something that's going to be reoccurring as this podcast goes on, and it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, and I don't give a damn. But the one of the recurring themes in this podcast, I'm gonna kind of hammer home episode after episode is I would be on board if Armenians were as determined as Jews or Palestinians in the Armenian cause. If they were, I mean, I might not agree with certain things that we do, but I'd be like, okay, at least we have a plan. At least there's a cohesive goal. If we're gonna, at least we're doing something like what Israel or whatever is doing, but we're not even that. So, I my position is I, support coming to some kind of peace treaty, normalization with Azerbaijan and all that. Um, partly because I partly agree with you, like it needs to end somewhere, but also partly begrudgingly because we're not Israelis or Palestinians. We're not Ukrainians who, even though some of them have fled, a lot of them have also stayed to fight. We are kind of gutless as a people. So
I'll have to push
that
back
that's
very
that's
strongly about this, but I'll let you finish, please.
yeah. Okay. We have a loud minority of Montes among us, but then the rest are like yeah, Hayastan, Hayastan. Okay, when's the next flight to LA?
Right, right, exactly.
So, so if at least 50% of us were Montes, then I would be more on board. But because we're not, I am more on in the Pashinyan camp of normalization and finding some kind of mediator and just settling things because uh, nobody's going to stay and fight.
So the first thing I would argue against is you advocating for us to be more Montes. Monte, a international terrorist, a person who has murdered very innocent people. I don't think we need more of that. We need less of that. That period already existed from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. It was a horrible period. It harmed our political aspirations greatly because in the international community, we were looked at as terrorists. We don't need more of that. The other thing I would say is that there isn't any kind of deficiency in zeal for the Armenian cause. I don't think we have less of that than Israelis or Palestinians, as you claim. I just think they have a different component to it that we don't have. Ours is based purely on classical nationalism, whereas theirs is also based on religion. They have religious zeal behind their nationalistic goals. Israeli settlers are settling in the West Bank because God commanded so, and it's in the Holy Scriptures. That's a very different thing than, oh, these were our historic lands and we need to settle them, which they also have. But that religious zeal is also significant, let alone the religious zeal of the resistance among Palestinians who, tend to be very strictly adhering to Islamic concepts of jihad and resisting infidels and so forth and so on. So we lack that religious component, and I'm actually going to say that's a good thing that we lack that religious component. Ukraine also has a different component that we are lacking. Ukraine is a massive country with a large population. We don't have that. There's 30, 40
Mm-hmm.
million Ukrainians in the world, more probably. There are
Yeah.
barely 10 million, and most of that 10 million Armenians are assimilated in various countries of the world. So you have to remember, I mean, we did suffer various massacres and genocides. Not to say Ukrainian populations haven't, but it just doesn't decimate them to the level that it decimated our population historically. So we can't do what Ukraine's doing. We not because we're less fighters or whatever, but they just have so many more people they could just throw at the war that we can't. So I I don't agree with your framing of it that we're any less nationalistic or any less adherent to the Armenian cause than any of these other people are for their own nation's cause. That's not it at all. We just have certain cards we've been dealt. We need to play those cards. That's all I'm saying. Play the cards that are in front of you. Don't play cards that you don't have or you wish you had.
Yeah. But it's not it's when I say we're like less nationalistic, um, I just mean that okay, and maybe look, I'll grant maybe this is a proportionality thing, like maybe the amount of people that have fled Ukraine are roughly correspondent proportionally with the amount of people who are like leaving Armenia instead of staying and protecting it and all that. But it's just that we have a smaller population, so that like takes more of a toll on us than it would with Ukrainians. Maybe
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay, I'll accept that argument. Yes, it does take more of a toll on us. Going from, a population of 3.5 million to 2 million for a country is much more impactful than going from, let's say, 40 million to 35 million. Yes, they lost more, but it'll be less felt than for the smaller country. That's a fact.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm willing to grant that. Although didn't we lose a lot more like at the time of independence, or wasn't there a period at some point that the Armenian population s- altogether soared to like 6 million or something?
No, that's never happened. No.
No. Okay. Okay. I don't know why, but I thought I
So,
heard somewhere that like at
Burutian
independence.
is a great source on this. I was very fortunate to attend one of his lectures where he talked about this exact thing. And
Yeah.
according to him, the late 70s were the period where the largest proportion of Armenians were in Armenia. About 40% of Armenians worldwide were in Armenia. And the population had swollen. This is the biggest it's ever been, to 3.8 million. This is what I remember his number was, 3.8 million. And you have to
3.8
remember
million.
also a large segment of these were non-Armenian ethnically, right? There were Azerbaijanis still there. There were Kurds there. There were Yazidis, Syrians, Greeks, Russians. So yes, it was 3.8 million. If we were just purely going to count ethnic Armenians, what would that be? I don't know, like 3.2 million, 3.4 million. I don't know. But that's the biggest that's ever been. The late seven, like 1979, and at about 3.8 million. Now most statistics cite that Armenia is just under 2 million, which it's almost halving yourself. Think about that concept. The
Yeah.
policies that Armenia has led since the 1980s have halved its population. The Nagorno-Karabakh movement, the irredentism, the militarism, the lack of any kind of foresight about forming a decent economy that could sustain people. This is what it leads to. It leads to you losing your population. And given these circumstances of Armenia losing its population, the idea that we're talking about settling some other territories outside of Armenia is some of the fantasies and deficiencies that I find with the mentality of most Armenians.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you and I agree on. I think you and I agree on a lot of points. It's more like the context on which we agree. I agree more out of pragmatism, whereas with you there's also like the kind of ethical component of
I
it
have a
as
lot of
well. So
morality and ethics in it, but at the end of the day, my main driver is the truth. I'm just interested in the damn truth. Can
yeah,
we speak about the truth as it exists?
yeah, right, right. And to be clear, in the future, let's say in the future, after some agreement has been reached, and let's say Armenia does become stronger economically, militarily, I'm not advocating starting another war. The only scenario I would ever advocate starting another conflict with, or not starting that, okay, that's the key component. The only scenario where I would ever advocate like fighting with Azerbaijan again in the future is if they started it. So I am also in agreement with you that once this whole thing is settled, that's it. I don't want any more of this bullshit.
Yes, but as
Um,
Azerbaijanis always point out to me when I cite they're starting it, which they're currently doing for the last 2 years, they've just constantly been starting it. Even before that, for the last decade or so. They've just constantly been starting it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Armenia before that had been starting it for decades itself, right? So it looks, we were talking about hypocrisy, right? It looks hypocritical for Armenia to constantly push forward militarily, find various justifications for itself, reinvent things, rewrite things, and so forth and so on, so that it could just push forward, take whatever it wants. And then when it's on its losing side, when it's on its toes, or it's sorry for the idiom. It's, I think, on your heels. When it's on its heels, being pushed back. Now Armenia wants to say, oh, only defensive wars. No more pushing forward, no more offensive wars. We just want peace. It looks really bad. It looks very hypocritical, and I get that slammed in my face every single time by Azerbaijanis when I talk about the belligerence that Azerbaijan has now. I don't accept it from them, but nonetheless, you could understand that they do have a point. Armenians have acted this way for a very long time. And now that, Armenians can't act that way anymore and they're having someone else act that way, they have a big issue with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, that's why I'm saying, I'm not advocating uh like, being peaceful until we're strong and then like not being peaceful anymore. That's so I'm definitely not in favor of that.
Yeah, but it's
Like I said, once this whole mess is
but
settled,
it's
that's it.
also what I'm trying to say is it's also a bit too late for that, because I know you're very
Yeah.
young, and you weren't around in the world when Armenians were doing what they were doing in the first war, maybe, but they've already presented a picture of themselves, right? They've already stamped into the world that if they had the opportunity, they would do it because they did it. You know what I mean? And those people are still around. People who were alive at that time are still around. They're still calling a lot of shots in Armenia. And that's what we have to understand here. I know when you're a younger generation who wasn't around, you just want to dismiss all of that. We can't. We can't. I was a child when the first war happened, but at the same time, I can understand them saying, "I don't trust that you want peace because that's not what your country did at that time."
Yeah. Well, then what can I say? I guess we just have to prepare for defending
We have
ourselves.
to. That's the number one right now. Unfortunately, we do have to prepare, defend ourselves long enough. And this is, again, just a very optimistic hope. I don't know if it'll happen, but you defend yourselves until the point of things cooling down enough for a long enough period of time that there is some kind of a desire on both sides for real peace, and it could be accepted on both sides. They will believe it when they say when Armenians say we want peace. They will believe it because long enough has passed, time has passed, and they could understand that it's a new generation and let bygones be bygones. That's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. I've actually given up on that idea, especially after the 2022 war. 2020, sorry, 2020 war. It became clear to me that it's not going to happen in my lifetime. But you're going to have more years than I, so I hope it happens in your lifetime. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, again, this
Yeah.
is the situation we are in, and much of it, we planted ourselves. We have planted this future for Armenia, unfortunately. And I say we. It wasn't you. It wasn't I. It was our parents' generation, our grandparents'
Yeah.
generation. But here it is.
Um. Yeah, I think at the very least, one diplomatic thing that could have been done on the Armenian side, um, is because I have heard that Azerbaijan during in previous decades did offer like almost like the highest level of autonomy just short of independence or something. Now I don't know how genuine they were in that offer, but it would have been a good opportunity for the Armenian side, in my view, because we could have said, okay, that's an interesting proposal. We're open to it. But how can we make sure? How can we ensure the safety of the Armenian population? Are you going to allow like international observers to like keep an eye on the situation, et cetera, et cetera? I think the best way to show like it, at least like in the field of negotiation and diplomacy, that you are open to negotiation is be willing to walk to like have almost like a backup thing, like, okay, if not this, then we're willing to do this. Okay, if not that, then we're willing to do that. That way, if the person, if your opponent is like being inflexible, you can show yourself as the more reasonable party. Like, hey, we made multiple offers, that we were willing to walk back, but they weren't willing to walk back a step. Like, I think we really didn't help our image by having the stance of like, no, nothing short of independence. Uh,
Well,
so
unfortunately, you don't recognize what the Armenian end goal always was. you know, although Armenians and Armenia was partaking in a negotiation and a peace process, the end goal for Armenians always was to either get independence or get attachment to Armenia. In fact, independence was always supposed to eventually lead to incorporation into Armenia anyway. They were just willing to give it, more time as an independent state before it actually joined some kind of union with Armenia. And that is incompatible with the end goal of Azerbaijan, which was to maintain its territorial integrity, to maintain Karabakh, Nagorno, and non-Nagorno, mountainous and lower Karabakh as part of the Azerbaijani state. They are incompatible. The end goals are incompatible. So you're saying that there was these moments where the negotiations were very close, and they were. And I do believe Azerbaijan was very honest about offering this types of autonomy to Nagorno-Karabakh. However, their end goal was to offer this autonomy while it maintaining itself as a part of Azerbaijan, and the end goal of Armenians was to not allow that to happen, to do whatever must be done so that at some point it leaves Azerbaijan. That's just incompatible. At the end of the day, those two things are incompatible, and they will lead to this type of war. If Armenians were okay, honestly, with Nagorno-Karabakh staying within Azerbaijan, that would have been a different thing. And I know Armenians say this, internationally, right? They say this in the negotiation process. But I've been part of the Armenian nation long enough, and I think you have as well, where that was not true. Armenians did not
yeah,
in any way
yeah.
want
No,
to
I
remain part of Azerbaijan, and they were going to do whatever was necessary to prevent that from happening.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm definitely well aware that that was the end goal. um, well, what I'm what I'm suggesting is that things would have gone better had that not been the end goal. Like, had we been open to like, okay, the next step down from independence or something.
Yeah.
That's the point that I was trying to make. Like, things would have gone a lot better, and that would have been a good way to test Azerbaijan's thing. Because let's say they offered it, and we were like, okay, we're open to that. But how do we like, as a gesture of goodwill, are you willing to allow like third party international observers to monitor the situation and make sure that their thing? That would have been a good litmus test to see
Well,
whether Azerbaijan was really
I'll have to
genuine in
remind
its
you that that is
offers.
exactly what former President Levon Ter-Petrosyan was negotiating, and it was the Armenian side that called for his resignation. He was negotiating international peacekeepers, just like you described, coming in to ensure that. In fact, I was just having this discussion with another friend of mine. Levon
Mm-hmm.
Ter-Petrosyan, in one of his recent interviews, and by recent I mean a few years ago, um, he
Mm-hmm.
clarified, because a lot of people don't understand what was being negotiated. He clarified what the uh, the process that he was negotiating would create. What would be the outcome of it? It would not be that Azerbaijan, washes its hands of Nagorno-Karabakh and it becomes an independent state or joins Armenia. It was not anything like that. What he was negotiating was that he wanted to see it become what Cyprus has become, where you have UN peacekeepers there guaranteeing security. There's a guarantee that there will no longer be any attacks on this population. And whatever is decided or negotiated later on would be decided diplomatically without war. His end goal was to avoid war. That's what he was negotiating. And that's what he believed he had accomplished by the deals that he was making at the time in 1998.
Go. Okay. All right. Sorry, little technical difficulties there, folks. But kind of to add on to something that you said, because even if you're the Armenian even if one is the Armenian nationalist, kind of patriot or whatever, I think there's a misconception about LTP, that what he was advocating
And by
was
LTP, folks,
essentially like
Sako means Levon Petrosyan. Just be very clear, because some people might not understand.
yeah, Levonter Petrosyan. Yeah, I use LTP in the same way we use
Exactly.
like JFK
That's fair,
and
but I don't think a lot of
LBJ
people-
and yeah, LTP meaning Levonter Petrosyan. I think a lot of now, I mean, and I could be mistaken in this. I actually, one of these days while I'm in California, I'm hoping to meet him in person and ask him about some of these things. I actually have family who knows him, so but I think a lot of people think that there is this dichotomy. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. There's this dichotomy where either we're taking a strong stance, putting our foot down and beating our chest and, like no compromise with Azerbaijan, or we're being doormats and being walked over. And I think that's a false dichotomy that people really need to get out of their heads. Because let's say we went with LTP's plan, which was not a bad plan. In hindsight, now that I'm older and more wise
as he
in the
says,
situation,
it
I
was
would
the
have agreed
best
with it.
possible that Armenia could have hoped to negotiate at that time.
Right. What I would have let's say you are the militarist type, right? Let's say we agreed to have Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, stay as an autonomous province within Azerbaijan. Well, for those who are military minded, and I'm one of them, should there be ever any kind of threat from Azerbaijan in the future, there is always the threat, whether it's carried out or not, there's always the threat that, oh shit, we have a large Armenian population in the west of the country. What if? You know what I mean? So in a way, it would actually be beneficial to Armenia proper, I would argue, to have it in Azerbaijan and not as part of Armenia, because there's potential for military intelligence there. So even if one
Military
is
intelligence for
so
whom?
even if
Who's
one
going to
isn't
draw intelligence there? Armenians or Azerbaijanis? Armenia
Well-
or Azerbaijan?
Armenia.
Ah,
If we did end up eventually creating a good intelligence network, like say Mossad, right? Look at Mossad. They have agents in basically every country they want. So, it would actually be beneficial having eyes and ears in Azerbaijan. So,
and the population of Nagorno-Karabakh would be those eyes and ears.
not necessarily the population
The
as a
segments
whole,
that are
but
people
you know,
from
you
it,
could
drawn from it.
individuals, yeah. So whether one takes the view that coming to some kind of peace settlement was good morally and ethically, I mean, I'm open to it. I still have on that front, like I said, I still have like reservations, but I'm at least open to it from the point of view of pragmatism, in terms of how it would serve Armenia proper. And at the end of the day, Armenia proper is our internationally recognized borders. That's what we have. As you said, that's the cards we're dealt. So anything I do is for the benefit of Armenia proper
Good.
first.
As do I, and this is where we align strictly, right? It's not some other territory outside of the Republic of Armenia. It's not this fantasy state from 1918 that some politicians in Armenia are advocating for, and that should be the real Armenia, and we discard the Armenia that we have now. It's not for the incessant drive to get worldwide recognition of the Armenian genocide. Those aren't our drivers. Those aren't our main goals. Our main goals is maintaining, preserving, and allowing the prosperity of the Republic of Armenia as it exists, internationally recognized, 29,000 square kilometers.
Right. And here's the thing. Look, uh, people like folks like you and me are of the view that the the whole Turkish and Azerbaijani population isn't foaming at the mouth to like kick a like. I mean, obviously there are people like individuals and a minority, but most of the population isn't like foaming from the mouth to kick Armenians off their land and take take the last part of our homeland or whatever. But let's say they were right. Looking at again, returning returning to pragmatism over here. Um, one sec. Returning to sorry, I was getting a call. Returning to pragmatism. In all of this, if you are someone who does believe that the Turks are foaming at the mouth to pounce on Armenia first chance they get, and that's definitely in the works or whatever, and the only thing keeping them back are international parties or something. If that's really what you believe, then there'll be then if you really do believe in the prospect of getting back some old lands at some point in the future, then it will happen anyway because according to this view, they'll never leave us alone, right? So why not, at least for the time being, paint ourselves as a more reasonable party, and in the future, if they do attack us, then we'll handle it.
Yeah, no one's saying don't prepare, don't prepare for what may come. And no one's saying wear rose colored glasses and view your neighbor to the west through those lenses. Not at all. All that's being advocated is you can either set yourself up, head to head as pure antagonists, pure hostile parties to each other, and see who's going to win out. Obviously, it's not going to be the Republic of Armenia, it'll be the Republic of Turkey. Or you can set up some kind of situation where you become a partner, you become a trading partner, you become an economic partner, you become something. You form a relationship that doesn't put you head to head with Turkey, where your interests, it's not a zero sum game. You know what I mean? There can be actions that are taken that benefit both sides. In fact, if most Armenians had any kind of a reading of Soviet Armenian history, they would know this. There have been things like that, right? So on the river Arax, the and the Ahuryan River as well, the two rivers that form the border between Armenia and Turkey, there are a bunch of infrastructure projects. There are dams, there are hydroelectric plants, there are all kinds of projects that share and made use of the river and its resources. That happened during the Soviet period. That was a period of cooperation between Turkey and Armenia. Right? There are Soviet films dedicated to this. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. Inchue Armakum Geta. Why does the river make a sound or something like that? Didn't translate into English.
Agmuk is like noise or
Right,
racket. Like
right,
why does
right.
the river, why does the river
Right.
make
That whole
a
movie
racket?
is
I
about
guess.
that. That's, oh, we are now cooperating with the Turks and we're going to be sharing this river. And, oh, look at them on the other side of the border. They're people too. You know what I mean? It's very basic propaganda. But
but but
nonetheless, if we were
but was
involved in more
to,
projects
to,
like
to be
that,
to be
yeah.
fair though, to be fair though, was that made by the Armenians, or was that a Moscow
Of course
kind
it
of
was from
project? You know
Moscow.
what I
Of
mean?
course it was from Moscow, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because it was Armenians who were participating in that process, right? They were the ones who were participating in the
Yeah,
actual
true.
building of these things and the cooperation with Turkey, right? The rail is another one. Just go talk to anybody in Gyumri who was working in the train depot in Gyumri. They'll tell you they were cooperating, working with, friends with the partners on in Kars, Turkey, right? The train was every day, twice a day, going back and forth and transporting goods. And they were partners, right? The rail industry in Armenia was a partner with the rail industry in Turkey. These are facts, and we've lost all of this. We can't even reestablish what we already had, let alone have more cooperation and new projects together. That is what we should focus on. That is what's going to help us and save us from getting completely run over by Turkey. If we continue to set ourselves up as just complete opposition to the Republic of Turkey, we're just against it in everything, then we're going to feel that wrath, right? Now there is nothing that is redeeming about Armenia in the eyes of Turkey, and we're going to suffer because of that. So there's no foresight, I think, about these relations with Turkey among a large segment of Armenians, the ultra nationalist masses, and they form a very large number. It's not just the members of the Dashnak party, although they are one of the main drivers, but your common Armenian tends to also be very ultra nationalistic, unwaveringly so. Like there is no exception. The Turks are evil. We do everything to oppose them everywhere at all times, and they don't think that this affects Armenia negatively because most of them, unfortunately, as many Turkish people will point out, are in the diaspora. They live comfortable lives. They're not going to feel the repercussions of hostile relations between the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Turkey. They don't give a shit, and that's the situation that exists now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I yeah, I agree, and that is something that is going to be another reoccurring theme among in my episodes is you know it's easy to like if you're a monkey, right? It's easy to sling shit from the
Yes.
trees where it's going to be hard for the tiger to get you. um okay, it's like you imagine you have a scenario where you have like a tiger that is like growling at a bunch of monkeys on the ground or something, right? And then in an effort to of like solidarity or to try to like help them or whatever, um, the monkeys up in the trees are flinging shit at the tiger and getting it pissed off. More likely than not, the tiger, well, if the tiger is able to climb the tree to get the monkeys, that's a different story. But more likely than not, the tiger is gonna go for the monkeys that are like close at hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, um,
Whereas
so
if
it's
you
like
don't throw
starting up.
shit at the tiger at all, and the tiger is going to expend way too much energy to get any of the monkeys in the tree anyway, eventually it's going to get tired and move on to easier prey. It's going to leave you alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, ex- exactly, and and then there's also the other people. Okay, there's two people. there's two branches of thought when it comes to Armenian relations with Turkey. One is the more extreme variety, like, oh, they're drooling at the mouth. They're looking for the quickest opportunity to invade Armenia, take Sunik, and then like violently subjugate Yerevan underneath their rule or whatever. And then there's the less extreme, but I think equal, like somewhat more reasonable, but also paranoid thing of, okay, even if they're not trying to outright conquer Armenia and take the last of our homeland that we have left, they're at least trying to take us over economically, essentially turn Armenia into a Turkish banana republic, etc., etc. Well, simple thing. Just make sure we have people that are not going to kiss ass when the borders open. like, like if that is the concern, there are protectionist measures that can be taken.
Of course they can. And here's a
That's
different scenario, right? It all has to do with how you imagine things. Just an example, right? Just a scenario. Let's just do a thought experiment. Had Armenia spent its energy since independence building itself one of the strongest financial sectors in the entire region, Armenian banks, the resources that they could draw from around the world would have been unparalleled. And had they created a banking system like this, and supposing the borders don't get opened just as they didn't initially, but then one day soon they get opened, and Armenia has this banking sector, what would stop Armenian banks from actually dominating Turkey, right? Regions, I don't think they could dominate all of Turkey because Turkey is so big and huge. But I could see it, all of the east of Turkey could have been, under the thumb of the Armenian banking system. This very strong financial institution that Armenia had built could have been involved in most of the projects in all of those regions. But no, we don't have that kind of vision.
The governor of Kars could have been borrowing money from the First National Bank of
Absolutely.
Yerevan or something. The governor of Igdir could have
Now
been
we have influence
asking
over
for
Turkey.
finance.
Now we have, a button or two to push in Turkey. Why can't a scenario like that be imagined? Why must everything be this victim mentality that Armenians are eternally always the victims and they the predators that are just looking to eat us?
Yeah. Now, and also think about it like this. Um, imagine if now, okay, I don't know how good banks are in Turkey. Are they good?
They have a decent banking sector, but I
Or
don't think it's anything impressive, especially because they have a lot of involvement from the government. But again, I'm no expert at any of this.
yeah. Now, imagine, if you will, that now the funny thing is that even Armenians will point out that Erdogan is not necessarily a true believer, right? Because he'll change his position. At one point, he was like all for reconciliation with the Kurds and Armenians and all that. And then when he saw that he was gaining more from appealing to the hardline nationalists,
Yeah, it was a
he
one
took a more
direction
hardline
trajectory.
position.
Like he's not going back and forth. But yes, when he first came to power, he had the zero problems policy, zero problems with neighbors, as they call it, under him and Davutoglu.
Yeah.
And since then, because yes, he's had to rely on the ultra nationalists in Turkey for his political power because he didn't have the same type of majority and coalition as he did before. He's changed his tone and
Yeah.
become more hardline when it comes to Turkey's influence in the
Right.
region.
Right. And it really boils down to this. So, and this is where I was going to say, because I was asking about the Turkish banking sector for this very reason. Imagine if we had gone of in the direction that like what we were saying, like establishing a strong banking sector, strong IT sector, strong et cetera, right? Imagine if Erdogan, who again I doubt whether or not whether he's a true believer. I think he's more just an opportunistic
Yes.
politician. imagine if he said, "Hey, you know what? I don't trust these Turkish banks to hold on my assets," and he put his assets in like the First National Bank of Yerevan or something, right?
Now,
Do you
now
think?
you want Turkish
Do,
stolen money to
do you,
come to Armenia? No, come on, I don't want that.
oh, okay, 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 but something like that, right? Imagine like Turkish politicians or whatever put their banks or assets in Armenian banks or whatever, right? Well, guess what? Now that's yet another
No,
button to
my
push
point with that was
because
just to counteract the argument that Turkey will just have this very strong influence on Armenia and just make it. What did you say? Like a banana republic? Yeah, make it
banana
a banana
republic.
republic or whatever. That does not have to be the scenario.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be the scenario at all. Especially if Armenia makes the correct choices, right? If Armenia makes the incorrect choices, yes, it could lead itself into that path. Of course it can. But if it doesn't make
Yeah,
bad choices, there is no reason at all that it has to become that way.
right. And as it stands, like if we had, like you said, since independence, worked on that project of creating a strong regional banking center to the point where like people in Iran were putting their
Yep.
money in Armenian
Yep.
banks, people in Georgia were putting their money in Armenian banks, um, et cetera, et cetera. Even people in Turkey were putting their money in Armenian banks. We wouldn't be in that
So
position as it is now. As it is now, though, I believe if we did open the borders now, because we didn't do that, we can probably pretty quickly become a banana republic.
Armenians always
But
compare themselves to other states that had some of the same let's call it misfortunes as itself, right? One of them is Israel, which is a people who also reestablished their homeland, and it's rather small when it comes to other countries in the region. But the other one that I do often hear is Switzerland, right? Another landlocked mountainous country, and Armenians speak about creating a Switzerland out of Armenia. Well, do they understand how Switzerland became Switzerland, right? This is where my idea of the banking comes from, the model of Switzerland. Switzerland is able to be the banking haven that it is because of its neutrality. Because, as you said, neighboring
exactly.
states know that they're not going to one day, be enemies of their state and take all their money away or anything like that. They're always neutral. They're always there by themselves in the middle with their strong banking, and they could be relied upon. Had Armenia created a situation like that, where it was neutral, it was relied upon by neighboring states, then it could be a Switzerland. But it can't be, because Armenia does not set itself up as neutral. It sets itself up as belligerent, irredentist, and expansionist. And in those circumstances, you will never be a Switzerland. You're not going to be a Switzerland, period. So it's kind of amusing to listen to a lot of Armenians who want to create a Switzerland out of Armenia, but they don't want to have the qualities of Switzerland that made it the way it is. You know what I mean? With the neutrality and
Yeah.
not getting involved in war.
Right. Exactly. I myself have made the Switzerland analogy. Although to be fair, when I've done it, it's been more in the vein of um, the way Switzerland runs its cantons and all that. So so I like the whole federalist model. But yeah, no, I agree. At the very least, because I feel like okay, either Armenia has to be Switzerland or Israel, and and it's and I think this is the fork in the road that we're at. And honestly, uh, I'm more in favor of the Switzerland model just because I don't think Armenians have the wherewithal to be Israel.
Again, we
So
don't have the necessary elements, right, to build that. You know, uh, Let alone the geopolitical one, right? The access to the sea. We don't have that, which they do. They have an excellent access to the sea with the Mediterranean. We don't have that. They have relations with various the finance sector, the military sector around the world. We don't have that. We probably can't build that. They have that religious zeal that I talked about, right? People willing to move to the land and live in very difficult circumstances, work together, build something, and hope that your next generation after that, will prosper off of that land. A lot of the Israeli settlers were able to do that, that Armenians were not able to do. Not that they didn't, again, have that spirit. I have to cite that. I am descended from a great grandfather who moved from the United States to Soviet Armenia because he believed in the project of creating an Armenian state, and he wanted his children to grow up Armenian. You know what I mean? I am the product of that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what he discovered was Stalinist repression, right? Our history is different.
Yeah.
Israel didn't have to contend with Stalinist repression like my great grandfather did. You know what I mean? So it's not to say we didn't have those people. We did. We did. We really did. There was a lot of people who did move to Armenia with the same spirit, but it didn't happen. That era is over. We're in a very different era now, and so we can't build a state in the same models. We can't have kibbutz in the middle of nowhere where communities will be willing to live in very meager circumstances and just work all day and toil all day in the hope of their children having a better future. That period is over.
Yeah.
We can't do it anymore. When we could do it, unfortunately, we had to contend with the Soviet Union. Now it's too late. So we need to be more creative. We need to find more avenues and niche for Armenia in the international community. IT is a good one. Finance is a good one. Whatever, something that doesn't require a lot of natural resources, which Armenia doesn't have. It doesn't have a lot of metals and things like that. But the mining sector is not the way you build a sustainable economy. You mine it
Yeah,
until it's all
exactly.
gone, and then you got nothing.
And then it's exactly. And this is something, I mean, this is something that I want to point out to the audience, that um a- and I want all of you to pay attention to this, because obviously me and Artur don't agree on every single fine point, but we're able to have a civilized discussion like human beings without the word davajan coming into the conversation at least
Which
once.
means traitor for those that don't
That
speak Armenian.
is, yeah. It's that's a word that I'm in concurrence with Eric Hagopian when he said that that word needs to be washed
Right,
out with soap from our
100%.
political vocabulary. That's
At the end of the day, you
because
need to recognize this. Is someone interested in the betterment of Armenia or are they not? If I disagree with you or someone else, I know many people who are belligerent and warmongering, right? People who serve on the front lines. I know such people. Many of them I do get along with. Why? Because they recognize in me and I recognize in them that we want the better for Armenia. I may take a different route, right? I may take a left route and they take a right route or whatever. But at the end of the day, and this is true for all countries that have an issue with polarization, political polarization, you have to recognize in the other side, do they care about that country? Do they want the better for it or do they not? It doesn't matter how they want to approach it. You could argue that later, but start off recognizing in the other person them caring about the country the same way you do. You know what I mean? And we recognize that, of course. When
yeah.
we disagree on how to make Armenia better. Not that I'm arguing that we should destroy Armenia and you're arguing that we should preserve it and make it prosper. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which also brings me to another point that I want to make to our listeners is understand that those who are speaking of some kind of normalization, some kind of peace, we are not saying, we are not of the naive view that, oh, we signed some paper, and after some time, Armenians and Azerbaijanis are going to be
Yeah.
friends or whatever. We're not of that opinion at all. Nor, and this is even more important, when we say Armenians need to be realistic, when we say Armenia needs to be realistic, we're not saying except that we are in a weak geopolitical position and that we're always going to be weak and just make do with the weak position we have. No, we're saying except that we're in a weak position geopolitically, and then start the conversation on how we can increase that position and make it more valuable. We're not saying that we're not saying, for example, that Armenia opens up its borders and, oh, we don't have a strong economy, so we're just going to open the floodgate to all these Turkish goods and
The
we're
Turkish
going to
goods
become
are
a
already
banana
there. That's a
republic and then we're going to
ridiculous
have peace.
argument.
I
I
don't know.
always have to remind
That's-
people. Since Armenia became independent, and again, I was a very little kid, so I remember this. You might not. As a little kid, from the early 90s, Armenians have always been saying, oh, don't buy Turkish products in Armenia. You know what I mean? And they flooded in nonetheless. Even with a closed border and a blockade and everything, they still came in. People are still buying them because they're reasonably priced, they're of good quality, and so forth and so on. And so the idea that we're not, if we open the border, Turkish products are going to flood. And they're already flooded in. They've been there since the beginning. So no one should ever say that, ever.
Fair enough. And I can kind of attest to some of this. And this is something that actually kind of caused me a great deal of hurt. So you know how after the war, when the country's like grieving from the defeat and we're like trying to heal and like lick our wounds, and then Pashinyan put together this extravagant Independence Day thing, right? Which, by the way, was a total and complete misreading of the situation. I don't know. Maybe in his misguided way, he thought
You were there
like,
at the
okay,
time, right?
the country needs them. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
in
so
Armenia.
you
when
have
it
a
was
better
happening.
feel on what the sentiment of the people was than I do. But so I can't
Yeah,
concur
yeah.
because I don't know it enough. So go on. You tell me about it.
Right. Okay. So I think maybe in his misguided way, he's like, okay, the country needs a morale boost. Where we just suffered a major defeat. The country could use a little bit of celebration of some kind. He totally misread it. The country was in no mood for it. The crowd that was gathered in the Haraparak in Republic Square was very small, and most of the people, like even among some of the people that were gathered, they were looking at the whole festivities in disgust, because it cost millions of dollars to put this thing together. And people were rightfully so disgusted because they're like, that's money that could have gone towards Artsakh refugees. Give them housing, give them some food, give them the bare necessities. Or that's money that could have gone towards, you know, fortifying the borders a little bit, or like the military or something. Something useful, something practical. Anyway, so the day after the celebrations, as I'm walking again through the Haraparak, I see trucks, these white trucks. So these trucks were assembled, doing the cleanup, and then I couldn't see it, but I was walking with my friend, and he points to the trucks and he's like, "Look, it's in Turkish." So the stage assembly for these festivities commemorating our independence were provided by a Turkish company.
Of course they were. Who were they gonna buy it from?
I'm laughing, but I'm laughing with a lot of pain. But um, but hey,
Again,
it is what it
man,
is.
you used to
And
go to. I don't know if
so
it's
it's
still true. No, I know it's not true because I have been recently into Armenian supermarkets. But before, and I'm talking about the 2000s, right? In the early 2000s, when you would go
Yeah.
into an Armenian market, 40 to 50% of the products in there
Yeah.
were Turkish, right? You want toilet paper? It's Turkish. You want this household product, that house. You want appliances? Turkish. You know what I mean? Because it makes sense. They are a manufacturing power in the region. It's not just Armenia who's buying it. Georgians are buying it. Syrians are buying it. They're all buying it. It's all the dollar speaking there. It's money speaking. So the idea that somehow Armenia can keep out Turkish goods, it's absurd. It shouldn't even try. It's only going to harm itself. You could poke your own eye out, yes, but why should you?
Yeah, and even and if that is the case, because somebody could argue, okay, there's already Turkish goods filtering in. Imagine the tidal wave when we open the borders. Okay, well, again, there's protectionist measures that could be put to make
I
sure
don't
that,
think it would be any
well,
more than it
we
already
already
is.
are.
I don't imagine that whatsoever. No,
You don't think?
no. Because it's not that much of a burden anyway to bring it through Georgia, right? Other than paying Georgian customs and the transportation costs, there isn't that much more of a burden.
Right.
So the idea that there would be a much more significant flood of product, there's going to be some increase, obviously. Now it's cheaper, so more possibilities of products coming in that otherwise would have been too expensive. But nonetheless, most of what Armenia wants and
Yeah.
needs and is being fulfilled by Turkey is not an issue. It can already do it very easily. There's a reason for that. There aren't too many more options. Iran, Russia, Armenia's other two main trading partners, can't fulfill the need in that sector that Turkey can, and so they import it from Turkey.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, like, if people are really that hell bent on finding alternatives to Turkish goods, go open up a manufacturing plant. What can I
Yeah,
say?
yeah, compete, compete,
Open up a
sure.
toilet. Open up a
And they
toilet
did, and
paper
they did.
factory. Open up
And you know what it
a.
was? It was the most cheap, no good, sandpaper toilet paper. That's what Armenians opened up. They weren't willing to invest anything. It was, the relatives of various oligarchs who opened up these plants, and I'm speaking from experience. These are people who were known to my wife.
Yeah.
Who they lived in the neighborhood that she lived in. Um, that's what they
Yeah.
were producing, just total rubbish. So if you wanted good quality toilet paper, well, you got to get from Turkey.
Yeah. Unless somebody from the diaspora is willing to go open up like a toilet paper factory in Shirak or something.
You gotta have the resources for it too,
Which,
man.
if
I
they
mean, you
are,
gotta be able to source the pulp and all of that
yeah.
stuff, and you might not be able to do that in
Right.
Armenia. It might not even be
Like I said,
worth doing that. We could only dedicate ourselves to certain things. That's how the global economy
yeah.
works. You don't do
Right.
everything.
And you
You're
know
not
what?
North Korea,
And you know
trying
what?
to
There's
be
this.
completely
Right.
self-sufficient.
Like there's a simple solution if you don't want to get Turkish toilet paper and you don't want to get the cheaper sandpaper Armenian toilet paper. I don't know. Install a bidet and wash your ass.
Yeah, yeah. There's alternatives. Exactly. You don't want the Turkish toilet paper? Do that. No one is saying you have to buy Turkish products. Clearly, there are clearly people in Armenia who are okay with buying Turkish products. They'll speak a good game, but at the end of the day, they'll look at their pocketbook and they'll look at the quality of the product and they'll say, no, I'll take it. So there's a market there. That market that doesn't appear out of nowhere. All right, let's not be foolish about that. But that market is going to be the same market. Even if you open the border, it was the exact same market before and after. So I don't think there isn't going to be much of a change. There isn't that much of a threat of
Yeah.
any loss to the Armenian economy. You have to
And,
compete. You have to produce just as good as anything coming in from Turkey if you want local Armenian products to be the ones purchased.
right. And I think another thing that somebody might say is like, oh, if there's ever tensions between Turkey and Armenia, they can like hurt us by cutting off the products and making us like because we're dependent on it. Not unless there's direct war with Turkey. No.
So this is
Because
so.
we've had tensions with Azerbaijan for 30 we've had tensions with Azerbaijan for 30 years, and they haven't had an issue with selling us their toilet paper.
So this is so funny because in 2021 it was Armenia that passed the law banning Turkish products, the import of Turkish products. The only people that got hurt were Armenian citizens who were now not able to uh, purchase various goods at reasonable prices and reasonable quality that they had gotten used to. They were the only ones that hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You would go to the malls and you'd see all these closed shops at the mall because they were Turkish products and now they couldn't be sold anymore. That's already happened. They realized it was ridiculous and it was only harming Armenians. Within a few months after that, they got rid of it. They got rid of that ban. Now that ban doesn't exist anymore. So the idea that Turkey is going to cut off and we're going to get harmed, we already cut off. We already got harmed. And we realize we don't need it. We don't need that.
Yeah, yeah. I think people really need to take into account that things are a lot more complicated than they think, because um at the end of the day, yeah, all that really matters is dollars and cents. Look, um the ones controlling Turkey, at least for now, hopefully it stays that hopefully it does this is remains the case, but the ones controlling Turkey right now are not the rabid gray wolf nationalists that want to slaughter Armenians, although they exist. The ones controlling Turkey right now are opportunistic, corrupt politicians. They talk a big game, but at the end of the day, money is money. Aren't so so again, this idea that Armenians have, that the majority of Turks are true believers in the mission to sea to sea Turan or whatever, like invested in this project of like getting Armenia out of the way so they could have a clear bridge to Central Asia and all that stuff. Most Turks don't give a shit about that. And I know. I actually have spoken with many of them. So
Yes, and
if there's any enemy that Turks are more concerned about fighting, it's Greece. Armenia barely registers on their radar.
right, right, exactly. There are also people who believe in that pan-Turkic state or Turan or whatever, but what they envision is the existing Turkic states uniting together, not necessarily with destroyed Armenia, but with Armenia still existing in place. There are people who envision that too. There's all kinds of things that people envision. Some harmful, some not so much. That's not the point. That you can't universally just use a paintbrush and just say this is what every Turk was. This is what Turkey's aspirations are. But unfortunately, that's what many Armenians do, because they are ignorant of Turkey. They don't care to know Turkey, and deep down they hate Turkey. They hate Turks. They hate Turkey. They want nothing to do with it, and because of that, they stay ignorant about what Turkey actually is, what segments there are to Turkish society, what political motivations and goals exist in Turkey. They have no idea, and they just reflect their own prejudices on them.
Yeah. Again, whether one is a pragmatist, or when one is genuinely a believer in like peace and establishing like some like relations on ethical grounds, either way the solution is the same. Uh if you are somebody who believes in that there could be peace between Armenians and Turks, then you want to get to know the society, because hey, similar to Hrant Dink, maybe you can uh, build bridges that could be utilized later on to negotiate. If you are someone who is cynical, doesn't believe that there can be relation like peace between Armenians and Turks, then still get to know the country, because Sun Tzu always said, know your enemy. there's two things, and this is, and I feel like Armenians are deficient on both grounds. He said, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of
I
1,000
think it's a good
battles."
note to stop at. That's exactly what Armenians don't do. They don't know their enemy, and they also don't know themselves, unfortunately.
Yeah. So
All right, Sakos. I'm sorry I have to
definitely
get
some.
going, but finish your point. Finish your
All
point
right,
if you have a
Ape.
point.
Oh no, I was just gonna say we will. Whether it's me and Artur or just me, this point will be elaborated on in upcoming episodes.
All right.
So stay tuned. And thanks for
Thank
coming
you for
on,
having me.
Apejan.
Thank you. It was very, very pleasant.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and that was our show. I hope you enjoyed some of Artur's insights. I know it's not what we're usually used to hearing, but sometimes we need a little bit of a splash of cold water, a little sobering dose of reality to kind of snap us back, help us get back to basics, help us kind of get back to square one so that we can, from a more grounded perspective, assess our situation, look at our options, and make an informed decision on how best to move forward. To all of our listeners, good night and God bless.